Welcome back to another episode of the Peach Pundit Podcast. I'm Jason Pye, joined again by Scott Turner and Buzz Brockway. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Good evening. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patty's Day. I'm proud to say most of us are wearing green. Scott's got his Americans for Prosperity shirt on, and Buzz has his Masters hat, and I have some green and a tattoo of mine. You guys didn't see this. I got a pandemic doctor from the
Renaissance.
Yeah, from the plague days. So, I got that back in October. That's what you get for getting drunk at a fair.
So it's not Dr. Fauci on your tattooed on your arm.
No, but it should be, considering the man has basically run all of our lives for the past year. Actually, I'm going to take a moment of privilege here, and before we get into our first topic, it has been a year.
Yeah,
we didn't talk about in pre-show discussion, but it has been a year.
Yeah.
It feels like 10.
March 13th was the last day I was in the office. I wasn't feeling well, and I thought, with this thing going around, it'd probably be wise for me just to work from home that day. So I did. And the next day, our boss said, "Hey, let's just all work at home for a while." And that it's gone so well that here we are a year later, and none of us have returned to the office full time. So
yeah. Yeah, and Scott's lost in something else right now.
No, I'm listening to you. I remember exactly where I was. I think Bitcoin had fallen to just under $4,000. I was on the north steps of the Capitol with State Rep Michael Caldwell. I was like, wow, I really wish I had a couple $1,000s to throw into Bitcoin right now. That would have been amazing had I actually done that. Since it's recently peaked at over 60 grand. And I remember that day before the day before crossover day last year, I was in a committee hearing in the morning. I ran over to Georgia State. I gave a guest lecture, and then I ran back to the Capitol immediately for another round of hearings before we went into crossover. And we had crossover day, and we were all wondering, everything else was shutting down around us, and we were wondering, why in the world are we still here? Why didn't we wait to do crossover until after? Because we all knew we were going to shut down. We at that point, we just didn't know when, and we were not being socially distant. We shut down, I think, that Friday, and that Monday we came back in for a special session that was supposed to last for an hour, and ended up being there all day for the governor's emergency powers resolution.
Yeah, jeez. I think I had actually returned home the week before. It's like the weekend before we were slated to. We knew it was coming. We were going to start on March 16th, but we were hoping we were kind of waiting to make sure we got the staff, to work remotely, like planning it out in advance and giving them time to like situate and figure out how they were going to do it. But I went home like a week early. And so we had that first week, and then I was supposed to go back up to DC to see a show at the 930 Club. And then next thing I know, the show's canceled. And then we're like, oh yeah, and you're not going to come back into work starting March 16th. So, okay, cool. All right. Prior to that, it had been 5 years in which I had not spent a month in DC. The last time I did not spend a month in DC was, or spend at least 1 week in a month. It did not spend a month without visiting DC. It was April of 2015.
And it had to come back home in the middle of a pandemic. So it's not like you get the benefit of coming back to the real world.
Yeah, I didn't explain that real well, but yeah, I think you guys get the gist of what I'm saying. Anyway, so we have some notable Georgia stories this week. Starting first with this Washington Post correction that has been all over Twitter, national news, where the Washington Post admits that they got some real serious facts of a story, central facts of the story wrong. That conversation that President Trump had with the chief investigator of the Secretary of State's office, basically. Like criminal investigations are happening based on some of the things that were said in that story. You also have the second impeachment, I should say, of President Donald Trump, which was partially based. I mean, it was in the impeachment resolution, if I recall correctly.
Partially, yes.
Yeah, and so And they were basing it entirely on the word of one person, and that was Deputy Secretary of State Jordan Fuchs. I'm going to start with Buzz here, because Buzz was the one I think who flagged this for me as a topic. But what the hell happened, Buzz?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to this story. I think, I'll start with the coverage by the media. Shame on the Washington Post for taking the word of one person about a conversation that person was not involved in directly, apparently not doing any follow-up or checkup or fact checking on it, and thinking that, well, we'll just call the White House, and then the White House didn't respond. Okay, well, we'll just publish it. And then many other media outlets claim to have independently verified this information. Were they using just the same source? Was Jordan the source for all of these things? So I think you have to start. I mean, there's one big layer of this is just the media deciding. Look, the three of us on this podcast, we're not exactly Donald Trump's biggest fans. However, you do not set aside journalistic principles just because you don't like the person that you're covering. And that seems to have been what happened here. There's this mindset that's sunk into some of the media, and perhaps it sunk into the thinking of this reporter, that Donald Trump presented the gravest threat to the United States that we had ever seen. And therefore it must be true. Orange man bad.
Yeah.
It must be true. And so we don't have to fact check this. And here they are months later, having to walk. It's not just walk the story back. It's essentially kills the entire story. Now, right. I guess we should point out this is a different phone call than the phone call that happened with Brad Raffensperger and a number of other people and attorneys and stuff on the. We that recording has been made public already. This is a different phone call.
Yeah.
That whatever any illegalities that may or may not have taken place in that phone call, that's a whole separate thing. But this is a big story, and to come back a couple months later and say, "Whoops," that's astounding, and shame on all the media outlets that reported it this way. So.
Yeah, it only came out because there was a recording, right? I mean, and this is a pattern of behavior, unfortunately, for Ms. Fuchs. I have a history, obviously, serving with Secretary Raffensperger when he was in the House. Buzz and I both did. He was not my first choice. Buzz was my first choice for Secretary of State. So just being transparent there.
Thank God I lost.
Right? Being transparent there. But I have a great deal of affection for Secretary Raffensperger as a person. That doesn't mean that he escapes my criticism when I think that he does something that's worthy of criticism. And in this case, he has hired this lady. I don't really want to, Ms. Fuchs. I don't want to be disrespectful. He has hired her, and she really is way in over her head. And it is shown. She's trying to run the Secretary of State's office like it's a campaign. It's not a campaign. It's a major organization with lots of moving parts, lots of individuals who are doing lots of different jobs, lots of different types of jobs. And she has no experience running any type of large corporate environment at all. So she is a fish out of water in this office, and it's really starting to show. The people there that work for her are largely terrified of her. She has a reputation for being a very hot-tempered person, which is something that you may have run into, Jason.
No, it is something I ran into, because when I was at FreedomWorks, we were criticizing the deal that the Secretary of State's office was. We were criticizing the even purchasing more the electronic voting machines that the Secretary of State's office wanted to buy. Mm-hmm. We opposed the bill that was going through. We opposed the grant or the bond for them, and publicly, and the AJC quoted me, and she came at me on Facebook. Like, what kind of high schooler are you, where you come at me on Facebook, posted on my, tag me or posted on my wall, I don't remember what it was, and went at me and basically insinuated that, I work for FreedomWorks. FreedomWorks is based in Washington, D.C., so I don't know what I'm talking about in Georgia politics. It's like,
Yeah,
First
how
of all,
long have you been in Georgia politics, Jason?
well, it's like she was insinuating that I don't know anything about Georgia. It's like,
Right.
I live here. I realize I work in Washington, D.C. I understand that. And I get, because you remember that hearing I testified on when you invited me to testify on civil asset forfeiture, they made a point to say, well, where's Freedom Works located? It's like, well, Washington, D.C., but I live 38 miles east of here. I'm happy to show you my driver's license if you want to see it. And it was a situation like that. It's like, well, you're in Washington, D.C. You don't know what you're talking about. I have lived in Georgia my entire life. Yes, I work in Washington, D.C. I commute to D.C. for work, but I'm here and I vote here. She could have easily pulled my voting record and seen that.
So she attacked you personally.
She attacked me. She attacked me personally. It's just like, it's like, I get it, but like, this is not a campaign. You're the Deputy Secretary of State. You're the second highest ranking official in that department. Ultimately, your boss is accountable for your behavior, and the way you're behaving is it's beneath any sort of official, elected or not elected. And frankly, like, if you don't develop a thicker skin, you're not going to go far in this. And look, and I get it. Look, I'm 40 now. I don't act the way I did when I was 25 and 30 years old. Like, it took me a long time to develop that thicker skin, to not take disagreements personally. And none of the things we were saying, Freedom Works was saying, or even I said in interviews, on this topic, was personal. But she came at me personally, and it's like, I realized Tamar Holloman once called me a former Georgian in a morning jolt.
Now you're taking it personally.
I get that. No. Well, when I walk in the office and that story is taped on my door in my office, that rubs me the wrong way a little bit. And Tamar knows. She said, like, I'm never going to live that down, am I? It's like, no, you're not.
No, she's not.
But like, it's this person. If Secretary of State Raffensperger does not do something with her, and I'm not advocating
he's not going to fire her.
That's on him, and he's already facing voter backlash in a primary if he runs for re-election again. But like I'm telling you right now, if a byproduct of him losing is Jordan Fuchs no longer has a job in any sort of public or official capacity, I'm fine with that.
Well, it gets worse, right?
And I'm speaking for myself, not Scott and Buzz.
But it gets even worse than that, because there's a pattern of behavior here, and I'm gonna do some prediction, right? Because this is what I've observed from the Deputy Secretary of State, is that she's great at gaslighting. She's going to, she in this particular instance, she blamed the investigator for misreporting what was said. And it wasn't, and then saying it wasn't meant to be taken as a word for word quote, even though she allowed it to be out there for months. She never tried to correct the record at all. Right. So again, I'm establishing this pattern of behavior because I'm going to point to another example. Because when I was in the legislature, I got multiple memos that she signed off on that went to the legislature saying that when Fulton County was counting their ballots, she had an investigator from her staff on site the whole time. And the Trump team brings this video of State Farm Arena, and there's no investigator to be seen in the video. And I called this out during a hearing when I was on governmental affairs. And I pointed out, this did not match up. You guys told us twice in a written memo that you had somebody there the whole time. That was data and information that I repeated as a state representative. I believed what you said, which is, I think, what happened with the Washington Post, Buzz, is, instead of them double checking, this is somebody who's in a position where there's credibility. When you have a title next to your name, like Deputy Secretary of State or State Representative or State Senator or Lieutenant Governor or Governor, your quotes carry quite a bit more weight. If you're the source on a story, it carries a lot of weight. And I believed what they were telling me wholesale. I believed it because why would they lie? Right. The risk of lying is this right here, a complete and total loss of credibility. And in my book, Deputy Secretary of State Fuchs has no credibility at all.
None.
Yeah. So I guess, we've hit her pretty hard. Let me just say this.
Well, she's earned it.
There's some things that we don't know. And one thing we don't know is she responsible for the inaccurate information, or was the inaccurate information given to her? However, she didn't have to talk to the Washington Post.
Right.
She didn't have to talk to the media.
That's right.
And I think, in checking into this and some of these facts, what what I learned was apparently Secretary Raffensperger, if you think about what was going on, the president was trying, putting a lot of pressure, trying to get things to happen in Georgia in his favor. Secretary Raffensperger mentioned that there was another phone call, and that started the media down this road. Wait a minute, there was another phone call than this one that we had the recording for, and they started tracking this down. Now, that's where it would have been totally fine to say we're not talking about it. When the Washington Post calls, perhaps it would have been better to just say not talking about it, no comment. You can do that, and the Washington Post can throw a hissy fit or whatever they want to do. You don't have to talk about it. And so I think, we don't know if, who provided the inaccurate information. We do know who provided the inaccurate information to the media. And that is a problem. And that is, not serving Secretary Raffensperger well. It's only increased the furor here in the state of Georgia. Obviously, this is given the opening. David Schaefer, the head of the Republican Party, has been very vocal, pushing back and saying, "See, this is a problem. This is why we've been complaining about the Secretary of State's office. They're not the accusations against Trump are not true in this case." Others, we all know Trump has legion defenders out there, and they are all out there talking about how this just proves that everything they've been saying about the elections is true, and everything that they've been saying about Raffensperger is true.
Right.
So, all of this has to calm down, and we have to follow truth, but sometimes it's just best to not say anything.
Yeah.
Well, Buzz, I mean, just to refute that a little bit, okay? And she saw the story, and she's known for quite some time at this point that what was reported was inaccurate, and she didn't do anything to correct the record. And that's on her. That's where she has failed in her responsibility.
Well, I guess I think so. Let's talk about that for a minute. The correction that you see in the Washington Post mentions that there was an open records request, and then the recording was discovered in an online a computer trash file. So when that happens, what were the circumstances that brought that about? So your point is well taken, Scott. This should have been corrected a long time ago, but we don't really know when. When that was this open record request as a result of Fani Willis, the Fulton DA's ongoing criminal investigation into the President Trump's activities? I don't know.
The key point is her response and her gaslighting, which is throwing her own employee under the bus, the investigator in this case, right?
Well,
it's this line. It's this line. This is the line that incriminates her in my mind. It was never meant to be a word for word quote. Yeah. That's what she is saying now. And for me,
guess what? Every reporter that's worth his salt, when you tell them something, they're going to do their best to write it down word for word and tell people what you said.
Right.
So,
right. We've all been quoted.
Use your words carefully when you talk to the media.
Exactly. I mean, we've all been quoted. We know the game. And
if you're a quote of that magnitude, it's like, well, look, I'll give you background information, but you have to say this is background or off the record. This is what was said. But you cannot give some half-ass quote and or relay a conversation or tell a story about a conversation and say things that were never actually said.
And that's exactly what happened. And that's why she has no credibility. So
among other reasons, but that's but moving along because we're still.
I guess one other point I'd like to make that I mentioned the Fulton District Attorney's investigation into all of this Trump's activities generally as it relates to Georgia. Obviously this is a blow against that if it turns out that he did not attempt to pressure Miss Watson, the investigator. That takes that off. Now the other call that we mentioned before, where he's speaking with Brad Raffensperger himself, that's a whole other matter. And all of that tape is out there. And there's a grand jury that will either has been or will be impaneled, and we'll see where DA Willis takes all that information. But
right. Right. Does it torpedo the investigation is a good question. Here's the last point I want to make about it. And this goes to the pattern of behavior. This is something I've seen specifically with the Deputy Secretary of State's behavior over and over and over again, is this misremembering, misreporting, misquoting, intentionally misleading, maybe unintentionally misleading. I'll give her a little bit of a benefit of the doubt there, but it's always the gaslighting that comes next, right? So if when she watches this or hears what we've said, I want to make a prediction that her next response will be to fire back at us and blame us for getting the story wrong or whatever. Well, you know what? We didn't get the story wrong. This is what happened.
Yep.
And she's responsible for it. And she has to do better. We know that Secretary Raffensperger is not going to fire her. She's been in the foxhole with him in the tough times, and he's loyal. So he's not going to fire her, but she has to do better. And I challenge her just to be better.
I appreciate people who are loyal to their staff, but there's a point at which it becomes a fault. And I think we're now we've been at that point with Miss Fuchs, where it's loyalty to a fault. And if she does watch this and she does see this, and I think Scott's right, I think that the reaction is going to be to fire at us, and sure, that's fine. I'm a big boy. I can take the criticism.
All we're doing is talking about something someone did. We wouldn't be talking about it if it didn't happen.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, moving along to the state of elections reform, because we have beat that one into the ground. The state of election reform, and this kind of is tangential to what we were just talking about, with the House moving its package, the Senate moving its bills. I admittedly, this week has been a train wreck for me. So what's the state of everything going on right now? I know I'm getting text messages from groups I never signed up to receive text messages from. So Scott, start us off. Where are we at?
The House bill had a hearing today in the Senate, and I was not able. I was busy with work, my day job, so I was not able to watch or hear or get an update. But I did get a call from one of the legislators today asking for some feedback today, just on some of the general things and what I thought were the most important aspects and what are some things that should probably go. And we did not get to finish that conversation before we were interrupted, but I think there are some things in there in the Senate bill specifically that really need to go away. And we saw some really amazing things transpire with the Lieutenant Governor, Jeff Duncan, refusing to preside over the Senate while they were in the debate, and then going on Meet the Press over the weekend, making some really bold statements about, at will or no excuse absentee voting. And we have this, Jeff is a friend of mine. At one point I consider him a really dear friend. We've grown apart a little bit over the years, but the reality is, man, what leadership the dude is showing at this point. And not everybody's going to get on board with what he's doing, but I'm impressed by his willingness to stand up to do the right thing in this moment, in this really historic moment. Yeah. No excuse absentee balloting is not the reason why we lost this election. It's not the reason why Joe Biden won Georgia. It's a tool that people use. I don't think it's going to change turnout at all. And, and we shouldn't be making it harder to vote, regardless of the criticism. It should be easier to vote for everybody. I think if we improve our messaging, we're going to end up winning. But that's the state of things at this point. We're post crossover. What will happen over the next several days is the Senate will make changes to the House bill, and then they'll send it back over. And eventually we're going to end up in this conference committee where there'll be 3 members from each side giving it a go and trying to hammer out a negotiated peace, if you will, between the 2 chambers. But the Democrats are going to lock down and be opposed to whatever comes out. That's what we do know is it's going, if it passes, it will not be a bipartisan effort.
No, I didn't expect it would be, Buzz.
No. Scott's nailed it. And I think what's going to happen is I think the bill today that was considered by the Senate Ethics Committee has swelled to 98 pages. So I think what's probably likely to happen is the Senate had an omnibus bill, the House had an omnibus bill, and we will have a mega omnibus bill that will merge the two bills together. And as Scott said, what winds up in that bill and what winds up on the cutting room floor remains to be seen. I was down at the Capitol today doing some other business, and there were protesters there using the podium in the in the area there, and
Atrium.
yes, yes, thank you. Making speeches, not causing a ruckus, very respectful, but there to register their opposition. And we see Republicans are concerned about fraud, Democrats are concerned about suppression, and we can have an election system. And I think this is kind of the message that Jeff Duncan has been trying to send. We can have an election system that is secure, but ensures that everyone has the right to vote. And that's what we should be striving for, not trying to manipulate things in the favor of one party or the other.
As I've said before on this podcast, it doesn't matter. I think, well, Scott nailed it. Really, it's we shouldn't be making it harder to vote. We should be making it easier to vote. And by trying to make it harder to vote, we're tacitly admitting that our message can't win.
Yeah.
And it's so you've got to refine the message. You got to find out what works, and that's politics. Making people, particularly minorities, because that's the way I view it. It's we want fewer minorities voting. That's how I see it. That's how Jason Pye sees it.
Okay. Well, I think it's undeniable that would be the impact, right? I mean, let's just be honest.
It's a disparate outcome. That's it. Yeah.
But here's the thing: is what we need to really be focused on, and we could spend a whole series of podcasts on this. Is how our policies lift people out of poverty.
That's right.
How our policies are better for their educational opportunities and lead to economic opportunities. How our policies make it so that you don't have to worry about whether or not the government's going to pay for your healthcare, because you'll be able to afford your own because you have a good, high-paying job with your skill set that you got because we helped you get it. Yeah. And then we're going to lower regulation and barriers so that you can get into the marketplace and actually live the American dream and buy your own business and do your own thing and be your own boss.
That's right.
These are the things that we need to be into the minority community, saying we are here to help everybody and we want to help you too. Yeah. And we are falling down on that job on a regular basis. Yeah. We in the last 8 years, 10 years, we have authored the greatest criminal justice reforms in our state's history, which has directly impacted the minority communities that we are trying to target and get to vote for us.
That's right.
It's not that we don't want minorities to vote as Republicans. We want them to vote Republican.
Yeah.
But we're having a hard time penetrating this because every time we do something like this, we give fuel to the fire of these claims of racism.
Well, I think the claims of racism, it's a racially disparate outcome. It's the same thing that you get with the, and because I work on criminal justice, you can make the comparisons. The crack cocaine mandatory minimum that used to be 5 years, you got 5 years for 5 grams of crack cocaine, compared to 5 years for 500 grams of powdered cocaine. It wasn't a racist policy. It had a racially disparate outcome where, and you look at the Sentencing Commission's data, 80% of the people who are locked up under that mandatory minimum are African American. They're Black, and single digits are white. And then you also but the thing is, you look at the drug usage rates, and they're essentially the same. Yeah. They're essentially the same. You could even argue in some, 70%, 70% of cocaine users, looking at raw population data, raw numbers, are white. But the racially disparate outcome persists. I probably should have chosen my words better, but I will still maintain that the outcome will be that, the outcome will be that fewer minorities and African Americans will vote. And that'll be the net effect of this. That's how I feel. Right. I've always been very sensitive to racial issues. And I think that's predominantly because I'm from the South and I understand the history here, and I understand my ancestors, and they fought for the Confederacy. I'm not real proud of that. But at the same time, like when we start having these discussions about things like this, I get real touchy when it comes to it. And I agree with you, Scott, and we probably should one day spend an entire podcast talking, or even make it a series, talking about how the ideas we have. And I don't approach this from a Republican because I'm not one, but I am philosophically libertarian, and I have worked on the center right side my entire professional career in policy and politics. and I agree with, in terms of anything not social issue related, I tend to agree with conservatives on those things. And look, I mean, at the end of the day, like, and this goes back to another podcast I'm on that we talked about this last night. Things like the immigration debate, things like that. I mean, Republicans tend to not want immigration reform because they believe that the people who will come here will vote Democratic. That is at the end of the day what it all boils down to.
Well, I'll give you as a state rep in Georgia, I will tell you I fought the film tax credit. Number one, because I don't feel like it was actually beneficial for us. I thought we were actually
it's bad tax policy,
right?
Yeah.
But part of the reason, I mean, this is being transparent, is it invites people to move here from California who are not going to vote for Republican.
Yeah.
There in every state where Californians are, because there's a giant exodus out of California to states like Georgia, like Texas, like Florida, and everywhere you go in one of these states, there's a movement. Don't California my Georgia. Don't California my Texas. Don't California my Florida.
Yeah.
We had it all figured out here before you came, which is why you want to come here. And so I'll be very transparent. One of the reasons why I wanted to get rid of the film tax credit in Georgia, not just because it was bad tax policy, but because it invited people who were not going to vote to maintain the status quo of everything is awesome here. We have some great schools. We need to work on some things in our healthcare system, but we're tackling criminal justice reform. We have a low tax burden. Our quality of life is very high. Our crime rate's relatively low. I live in a city where there was exactly one murder in the last 3 years. Things are great here. You don't need to come mess things up. Yeah. And so I agree with your assessment that on the immigration debate, there is some of that. I don't know that that's all of it. There's some of it. There's a rule of law type of Republican. There's different types of Republican, but there's a rule of law Republican who looks at somebody who's willing. The very first act that they're willing to do in order to come to America is break the law, and that's scary to a lot of people.
We commit we commit 3 felonies a day anyway. So
yeah, I understand, but we have to recognize that there is that fear.
Yeah,
and that fear is real, and we'd have to overcome that with any type of policy that we presented.
So I'm going to go to the Georgia Tech fan with our next topic because, Buzz, you posted on it this week. Herschel Walker is actually running pretty surprised. For those of you who are listening to the podcast, not watching, Scott just head desked. So Herschel Walker, based on a pollster that has, speaking of going back to Jordan Fuchs, speaking of lack of credibility, has Herschel Walker defeating Raphael Warnock in a very too early poll, and right. And has Doug Collins and Kelly Loeffler, or I can't remember if it was Doug Collins or Kelly. I know Loeffler was one of them, losing to Raphael Warnock. So Buzz, is Herschel running?
That's a great question, and I think as I pointed out in my post, Donald Trump added fuel to the fire by saying "Run, Herschel, run," or words to that effect. I mean, obviously, Herschel Walker is an incredibly popular man in the state of Georgia, obviously, and his name ID would be off the charts. Everybody in Georgia knows Herschel, and whether he'd make it. The problem is, would he make a great candidate? Would he make a great politician? We don't know. Yeah. We don't know where Herschel stands. We know he endorsed Donald Trump, and he's seems to be a Republican, and by various things that he's done over the years. But I don't know. That's jumping out of this to take on an incumbent senator who will by the time this election rolls around, have almost 2 years under his belt of actual votes to point to and policies to craft to run on. That's a tall challenge to throw a first-time candidate out there. I understand, he's an incredibly popular person. He's a legend in the state of Georgia, and so I'm not shocked that he polls so well. But is he going to be a great candidate? And I hope that we all of us have been in politics for a long time. We see this all the time. A sweet-talking consultant will come and we'll take this poll and we'll do other stuff and we'll say this money over here will come and do this and boom, 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 and you can win. And that's may not be the best advice if you're a friend of Herschel Walker's. So,
yeah,
you know,
we just
man,
saw that.
I don't know.
We just saw that with Kelly Loeffler. We had
Yeah.
these consultants came to her, said she could win, and she was probably one of the worst candidates I've ever seen in my entire life. And Scott, you'll never live that down. And
awesome human being. Just saying.
If I mean she may well be, but that doesn't necessarily translate to being a good candidate. So and I would hope Georgia Republicans are looking at this going, we just got burned once. Do we want to get burned again?
No, they're not thinking that way at all.
I said I hope they were. I didn't say they were.
It's all about where are you on the pro-Trump spectrum.
Allow me to pour Coca-Cola on your statement. No, we'll put that fire out now. They're not thinking that way at all.
I'm a Pepsi guy, Scott.
Whoa.
Get out of the South. I just saw you drinking Diet Coke. Get out of here. Bottom line. Dude. Yeah, exactly. So let me just say.
You really are a former Georgian.
You don't have any credibility about Georgia politics. You drinking that.
I'm garbage. A Georgia fan, though. I'm a Georgia fan, like a lifelong Georgia fan.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know that you have any credibility at all drinking Pepsi products. None. So you should probably join the Jordan Fuchs Club of credibility. Ooh, did I say that out loud?
Look at this sweet 1974 Atlanta Braves tattoo that I have.
How do you not drink Coca-Cola, bro?
I just got really tired of it. I switched over to Diet Pepsi about 6-7 years ago.
Wow. I don't know. Would you drink? So here's one of the questions I would ask Herschel Walker if he was running for Senate. Would you drink a warm Coke or a cold Pepsi?
He better say a warm Coke.
So
he probably should say that. Yeah.
The problem with polls, back to the original topic, the problem with polls that are run this early when there's nobody else out there is that, number one, there's nobody else out there. There is no other name ID, right? So nobody's been campaigning. Nobody's been discussing it. It's way too early. It's like if we were to take the rankings for college football today on March 17th, it's ridiculous. It's way too early to figure out. The recruiting class hasn't actually shown up yet. Nobody's done their full spring practices yet. Nobody knows what the game field is going to look like a year from now. That's right. So that's number one. Number two, it was done by somebody who is a political consultant. Maybe they're trying to earn some cash, so that's another problem. The other problem is this growing sense that only celebrities can be politicians.
Yeah.
Which I'm over. I'm over it. You do not need to be a celebrity to be a good politician. You need to have a skill set that allows you to negotiate, that allows you to read a piece of legislation and understand the unintended consequences, which is few and far between.
Right.
At our legislature, at every level, by the way, even down to the city council level. You have to be able to see into the future and have a good ability to predict what's going to happen. And I don't see how Herschel Walker fits any of those parts of the puzzle. No. I just don't.
He doesn't.
And here's the number one thing is he lives in Texas. He's not even a Georgian anymore. He didn't decide to live here. He didn't decide to raise his family here. He grew up here. He went to football. He played football here. That's great. He's a legend here. We love him here. Yep. It doesn't mean that he would represent us at all here.
No, another name that was floated out this week was Drew Ferguson, the congressman from West Central Georgia. So, he's, I believe, in his second term in the Congress, seems to be earning a good reputation in the Congress among his colleagues and stuff. But that's an interesting move for him. And I think we'll have to keep an eye on that. How serious is he, or is this a trial balloon? And where does he come down in all this?
Because I think he's the deputy whip of the House Republican Conference, which basically means he is largely responsible for counting the votes after Steve Scalise, who is the whip of the Republican Conference. Right. But I mean, and with all due respect to Congressman Ferguson, he's had I think he's in his third term. I think he just started his third term.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yep.
But with all due respect to him, it's just he doesn't really have. I mean, granted, he's been in the minority more than he's been in the majority. But what exactly has he done? What's his sell to voters in Georgia?
And history, if you look back to when Nathan Deal decided to run for governor, a person leaping from Congress to a statewide office doesn't have a great track record in the state of Georgia. The Governor Deal, then Congressman Deal, broke that mold and ran against the trend. But there have been a lot of congressmen who have tried to, most recently Doug Collins, tried to make that leap to statewide office. It's not easy because you're known in that area of the state, but the rest of the state, they don't know who you are. They don't know.
Yeah.
Name ID is a funny thing. You think you have it and you really don't.
I know who Drew Ferguson is, but I can guarantee you, as I walk up my street, not a single person knows who he is.
No, I mean the only thing I know him as is Lynn Westmoreland's replacement.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and the deputy whip. That's it.
Yeah.
Who other? So Jason, you're kind of tied in closer to our congressional delegation than I think we are. I have a great relationship with my own congressman and maybe one other, and one that I'd like to know a little bit better. But who other in our delegation would you think would try to make a run at that? I don't see Barry Loudermilk doing that. Do you?
I don't see Barry trying to do it. I don't see Jody trying to do it. I don't see Austin trying to do it. Although Austin, I think he's a sleeper.
I think Austin would make a very intriguing candidate.
Well, he ran for governor in 2010, which
he did, but he dropped out to run for Congress.
Dropped out to run for Congress. He's been there for he's been there now for this is his 10th year or 11th year. So he's on armed services. I think he's on armed services. He's on House Ag, I believe. And eventually he'll get to a point where he can either be the ranking member or the chair of one of those committees, but he's got a ways to go.
Yeah.
I mean, and I didn't check the order, which means the seniority of where he's at on the committees, but he's still going to have a while. And I mean, he's one to watch because I think he's had statewide ambitions in the past, but I don't think he's going to wind up doing it. Buddy Carter, being down in Savannah, being down in South Georgia on the coast, I don't think that he is prime for that. See Jack Kingston, who had way more name ID than Buddy Carter does.
Yeah, he served a lot longer too, though.
He did. Yeah, he did. That's true. And the only other person that leaves us, Andrew Clyde, who's a freshman. Yeah. He's in his first 3 months in the delegation, and then you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is completely insane.
Well, yeah, I think for Andrew Clyde, he's really probably grateful for Marjorie Taylor Greene because he gets to be the not crazy one, right?
That's right.
Because in the House, I was always thankful for guys like Matt Gertler and Charlie Gregory because I wasn't the crazy one. So I think probably
look at me. I'm sane by comparison.
Right. That's I might have actually. You might have just quoted me there. Maybe according to Jordan Fuchs.
No, I think I think I probably did just quote you there because I think you said that to me at one point in time.
Right. Yeah. I'm not the crazy one. Look at there's that guy over there.
But the one thing I'll say is I'm actually, I noticed on our Twitter account that people were saying, well, you guys quote, and I made the reference to this too, that the pollster wasn't very credible at this point in time. Look, it's fodder. Yeah. Because to people who were complaining and whining about, oh, you guys are this is not a credible, this far out, this doesn't really mean anything. He lives in Texas. Look, these are all
the things I just said.
Yeah, we all know that. We all know that. Well, you could have been tweeting at us. You might. Would you have multiple? You have
whoever's tweeting that, you are heard.
Scott,
ma'am or sir, I hear you.
you.
I hear you. Yeah, I'm creating garbage accounts so I can tweet you.
My point is, it's going to be a competitive seat, and I think a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen. And who because the Republicans really don't have a bench right now. I think we're starting to see that in this and someone like Herschel, who with all these flaws that we pointed out in terms of not living here, he'll be he'll be seen as not understanding the needs of the state despite his history here, despite being from here. Hold on, Scott. And he could be it. He could be the guy just if he decides to run, if just by nature of not having anyone else.
Yeah.
Unless Derek Grayson's running again.
Well, no, God. Do you really have to, man?
Yeah, I had to get there. I'm sorry.
All right.
Oh man, the minister.
I'm gonna wrap
actually, you know what? Actually, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry I said that because it got a reaction out of you.
Yeah, it did. It absolutely did.
Don't be dissing the minister of truth. Come on.
I didn't. So All I'm going to say, let's wrap this up and we'll go to the next topic because we're running short on time. But here's the thing is I haven't said I wouldn't. That's all I'm going to say.
You heard it here first, guys, on the Peach Pundit
I haven't
podcast.
said I wouldn't.
Scott Turner says he hasn't said he wouldn't.
Well, we did, we should note Jeff Duncan said he wouldn't. So
yeah,
strike him.
That's right.
So
yeah.
Purdue is out. Doug Collins has a job in a radio show. Kelly Loeffler's got a pack. Jeff Duncan is not running. So it creates a vacuum where names.
I haven't said I wouldn't. That's all I'm going to say. I haven't said that I would
Scott
not.
Turner, Herschel Walker,
Listen to
I
me,
am not
okay?
running.
I will
At least
make
one
this
of those
commitment
guys
to
would
you.
make a great backfield.
No, you made your announcement. Let me make mine. I am not running for United States Senate.
Well, I will make this commitment to you. If Herschel Walker is the only person running, I will put my name on the ballot.
Anyway,
there we go. We're making all kinds of news here on the Peach Pundit Podcast.
So moving right along after that depressing topic, on to more depressing topics. We all know the House and Senate have passed the I hate the name of this bill, the American Rescue Plan Act, which President Joe Biden signed into law last Thursday. We noted this on the podcast last week, but there's a very concerning provision in there as it relates to whether states can or cannot cut taxes, even directly or indirectly through even agency reinterpretation of a statute would be considered a tax. If it lowers revenue, it would be considered a tax cut. But that's if states accept this money. So that is, and Attorney General Chris Carr has signed a letter with 20 other states attorneys general, basically previewing what will be the Supreme Court or the court case, the lawsuit against the Department of the Treasury, should that policy be enforced. And I think that's once again underscoring that is one example of a really bad provision. I would argue that the state bailouts and local government bailouts are really bad provisions. I would argue that the increase of the ACA subsidies, because you're going to eventually get to a cliff where those subsidies no longer exist, and the reaction is going to be to extend them. So we're seeing some bad policy. We saw some bad policies in that bill, and guys, I gotta imagine there are other ones that I didn't mention that you guys have identified. So Buzz,
the extension of additional unemployment benefits of I think $300 a week through September. That's already been shown to be a discouragement, a disincentive to return back to the workforce. The workforce participation rate is down from what it was a year ago, and even it's declining. So people are stepping out of the workforce for a variety of reasons, but this helps them do that. And so it seems to run counter to what Joe Biden says he wants to do, which is to get everybody back to normal and graciously give us permission to gather in small groups of vaccinated people, and sometime around July 4th. How are you going to do that when you're going to extend unemployment benefits through September? So you mentioned safety net cliffs in Medicaid and other safety net programs. Food stamps is the same problem. It's increasing the cliffs that make it harder for people to get out of these programs and back into the workforce. So it's running counter to his stated desires of wanting to get the economy back and humming again.
Before you turn loose here in 1 second, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget actually said that the cost of the bill, which the CBO scored at just under $1.9 trillion, could actually be closer to $4 trillion, because once you would take into account the interest and other costs associated, and the potential extension of all these programs once those safety net programs run out, extending them out is going to just add to the cost and add to the cost and add to the cost.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier about what the impact is of the policy that we try to implement as policymakers. And this is one of those where Buzz kind of hit the nail on the head. I follow a couple bars and local business owners. There's a bar in Marietta. It's been there forever. And the owner of this bar is on there daily talking about how he can't get people to come back because the base pay, even though the tips are much greater than what they would earn, the base pay is not really competitive with what somebody would be making in unemployment. So people who were laid off earlier won't come back to work because they're getting all these dollars in unemployment for not working.
That's right.
And so how do we get back to a normal economy when people are being able to sit at home and not go back to work? Because this guy can't open his dining room as much as he wants to on the Marietta Square because he's competing with the U.S. government to try to employ people.
That's right.
And he's losing the battle. So we're seeing those types of real world examples. It's not that we're heartless when we say these unemployment benefits shouldn't be included. We want to help people when there's a problem and they need help, not the sake of them going back to work when things can get back to better.
Yeah, and look, there are things in this bill that will help people. There's no doubt about that. And but that's what the bill should have been focused on. That's like, a tiny sliver of the 1.9 trillion. It's
really been, it's a pork barrel bill, right? I mean, it's going to every special interest under the sun. Only a portion of it's going directly, even though it's a huge amount of money, it's going into these folks who are making less than 150,000 as a household.
Yeah.
A married couple with 4 is going to, a married couple with 2 kids going to make $5,600. Inflation is around the corner, folks. It's coming.
It is coming. And that's it. Just from talking, it's like the $1,400 checks. I mean, and we haven't talked about that at all, but the $1,400 checks are something that's frustrated me because the data has routinely shown that people do not spend that money.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think people don't understand is people, Keynesian economists often talk about how we need consumption. We need consumption. An economy thrives based on production, not consumption. If you produce it, people will buy it, but production is the key. So we're missing the point entirely when it comes to the stimulus checks, and not to mention the fact that people generally, this is not across the board, but generally speaking, people pay down debt. Or they save the money. That is what they do with these checks, to a large extent. Not everyone.
Thank God they do, because otherwise the inflationary effect would be even bigger than it is.
Yeah.
But that's probably that probably explains why you see the stock market booming, and the economy sort of bumping along, because they're putting that in a 401k that gets invested in things in the stock market, and up you go.
No, I'm not. I mean, sure, but at the end of the day, it's blatant vote buying. And you have a class. You have a class. Like, one of the funniest things I've ever read was we had this. Remember that Reddit, that subreddit that basically drove Robinhood and drove GameStop and drove AMC and drove all these other companies. This sort of activist stock buying, and he basically he was tweeting out like, I'm not a socialist, but we just want to freely buy and sell stocks. But a couple of tweets down, I went and looked at his Twitter page. A couple of tweets down, it's like, I want my $1,400 stimulus checks. Like,
he wants it so he can invest in more GameStop stock.
No, I get that, but don't sit here, because it's just, and for Republicans, it blows my mind that there are Republicans who support that policy. People like Josh Hawley and a few others who supported the checks. It's just like, that's the Republican Party's own brand of socialism.
There was a great story that the writer Ben Domenech used to talk about.
I hate Hawley.
At a Republican debate, maybe it was 2012 or 2008. I may have the date wrong, but they go out into the audience. Ron Paul was a candidate for president at the time. They go out to this guy who's older gentleman who's wearing a Ron Paul T-shirt. Why are you supporting Ron Paul? Because he's going to cut government waste. Everything except Medicaid and Social Security. Now, honestly, Ron Paul probably would have cut those too.
Yeah, he would have.
It's kind of
Ron
funny.
Paul would have cut those things.
You can see his mindset was, he's going to cut everything that doesn't affect me. Not my program. My programs are good, but all this other stuff is wasteful spending. So.
I mean, I always, it's one of those things. I remember Mitt Romney, and it was saying nice things about Mitt Romney last night on this other podcast, but this one I'm gonna turn and say something negative about him. And I realize we're running short on time, but I have one more question for you guys after what I'm about to say. And Romney, I remember during a debate, he was like, we got to address the deficit, so we're going to cut non-defense discretionary spending. It's like, okay, all right, so you're not going to cut spending. Is essentially
because there's nothing else in the budget.
It's like that much of the budget. It's like looking at FY 2019, it was about it was at 12 and a half. No, it was 15% of all federal spending. That's non-defense discretionary spending. And like 60+% of it is mandatory spending, not including interest on the debt. And then you add an interest on the debt, you're suddenly at like 68% of federal spending. It's like, you're going to eventually have to dress those up, those giants in the room, but,
yes.
Before we shut it down and wrap up before next week, Buzz brought up had an interesting non-political question in our pre-discussion. So what are you guys watching on TV right now? What have you been binging on?
All right, I'll jump in there. So
what was your question, Buzz?
Yeah, it's my question. I ought to have an answer to it. Now, I downloaded. I'm a cable cutter. I cut it a while ago. I haven't watched cable news in years, and it's been awesome. But
God bless you.
Yeah, same.
I have a Roku, and I downloaded the Peacock app, and there's a number of free things in there. So one of my all-time favorite shows, I think one of the best shows that's ever been produced, was Friday Night Lights. And so I've been watching it again with my daughter, and it's just, I still love it. It's just a great show. Friday Night Lights, if you haven't watched it, what I love about it is it shows small town life. It's about a football obsessed town in Texas, a fictional town, Dillon, Texas. It's based on a real book by Buzz Bissinger about Perryman, Texas. But it's just a great story. It shows small town life respectfully. Okay, and then they party a little more than probably real high school kids do, but whatever. It shows small town life respectfully, and it's great acting and great writing, and it's a blast, and I love it.
Scott?
So I have two, actually. The first is one I'm watching.
You only get one, Scott.
Well, you get two, or you don't get any. You choose. Two, and one is The Expanse. It's set 300 or 400 years in the future. It started out as a sci-fi show. Now it's an Amazon original. We got picked up by Amazon. It's based on a book series. Basically, there are three sets of human beings. One lives on Mars, one lives on Earth, and another in the asteroid belt, which was mined for the resources for the benefit of the other planets. And there's this interplanetary political struggle, as well as some military stuff. And then later in season one, it becomes more science fiction. Great show. Love it. Recommend it. My second show, I will tell you, I also am on the NBC app. I have a homeschooled daughter that for art appreciation class, we began watching Knight Rider. So there you go.
Wait, the 80s?
Yes. Yeah. David Hasselhoff is a national treasure version of Knight Rider. Yes.
Look, I'm finally convincing my daughters that the 80s was the greatest decade in American history.
My kids already know that lesson.
Yes.
For me, I just finished rewatching Dexter. One of my staffers, one of my old staffers over at Freedom Works, she mentioned, like, I've been watching Dexter. And I was like, oh God, I love that show. And so I started talking. She's like, I'm not there yet. Stop saying things. So I just, I shouldn't say I just finished watching it. Technically I did, but I missed so much of season 8 that I'm rewatching it again. But so Dexter, and I think I'm going to start my annual rewatch of The West Wing.
That's cool.
I every year I watch The West Wing at some point. So I think I'm going to start that soon, because I quote that show more than a regular person should. So we're out of time, folks. Thanks for listening or watching the Peach Pundit Podcast, depending on the medium on which you're watching this or listening to it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next week. In the meantime, please download, like, share, subscribe, do all the things that you can possibly do with this podcast on the internet.
Rate us on in the podcast, in the Apple Podcast.
We are the fastest growing podcast featuring two former Georgia state legislators on iTunes.
And with that, we'll see you guys next week.